So the world will tell you that Christians are bigoted, racist, homophobic, terrible, awful, hateful people who just judge everybody and think they're better than you. And the people who want to solve that problem and correct it is the He Gets Us campaign. What are we to think? Stay tuned to find out. Okay, so I've been actually following this for a couple of months. There's a big Super Bowl ad, He Gets Us. I don't know if they had 1 or 2 ads, something like that. They've got tons of YouTube videos that kind of put it out there. I'm gonna be honest with you. The slogan kind of sends some red flags up for me, and there's some reasons why. But I want to check things out, and I want to look into organizations and find out like what is it that's driving them from their own words, and kind of find out what are they motivated by. So as there's been a great conversation about this, I wanted to go to their website, find out what that was, and share what I found with you guys, and then we can make decisions together on, is this something that is a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it somewhere in between? Most importantly though, how do we as Christians respond and make use of the cultural conversation that this is generating? Because there are a lot of people talking about it. So if you go to the He Gets Us website, right up top they have that we have an agenda, and we want to tell you what it is. So I'm on this page, and it says, how did the story of a man who taught and practiced unconditional love become associated with hatred and oppression for so many people? How did the story of a man who taught and practiced unconditional love, peace, and kindness, who spent his life defending the poor and the marginalized, a man who even forgave his killers while they executed him unjustly, whose life inspired a radical movement that is still impacting the world thousands of years later, how did this man's story become associated with hatred and oppression for so many people? And how might we all rediscover the promise of the love that his story represents? Those are the questions at the heart of He Gets Us. Now, there are a couple of things in this that I think are important to know. And I do want to be clear, like, I don't know the people who run this. It's hard to find out, honestly. They seem to hide it a little bit. They talk about their donors are anonymous. They have a non-profit organization that kind of oversees it, that is difficult to find. There's actually a nonprofit called the exact same thing that is associated with something else, that if you go search on the web, that's what comes up. And they have very clear in their top bar on their website there that we are not part of the He Gets Us campaign.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Millions of families suffer every year.
So obviously a lot of people have been kind of trying to find out more information about this. I'm sure the information's out there. My meager skills at research in nonprofits and board members and things like that are unable to find out. Now, CNN did do an article on this. It's called The Truth Behind He Gets Us. And, the one person that they point out who has come out publicly and said that he has donated to the campaign is the co-founder, David Green of Hobby Lobby, who gets a lot of hate in the media because of his assumed stances or statements on LGBTQ kind of statements and things like that. CNN, basically just goes into a rant about David Green and how terrible he is, and if he's associated with He Gets Us, then He Gets Us is terrible. One of the things that I think has been interesting about all of the response from the He Gets Us Super Bowl commercials is the people who are opposed to Christianity hate it.
And talk about a preachy book.
And the people who are for Christianity are a little bit divided.
Well, I guess this is a case where we'll have to agree to disagree.
I don't agree to that.
Neither do I.
That seems to be where it's landing. Here's the big problem with what I see as their premise, what their motivation is. There seems to be, as my wife loves to say, a snuck premise in here. And the snuck premise is that somehow the culture coming against you with hatred and labeling you as something means that you're doing it wrong. So the question, how did the story of a man who taught and practiced unconditional love become associated with hatred and oppression for so many people? The reason is because even in Jesus' day, he was hated and rejected and despised. And he literally said that if you are with me, you will be hated and rejected and despised. So I think the snuck premises here is that if we're hated and despised by the culture, if the culture says that we as Christians are something that is false or not true or immoral, like hate and bigotry and things like that, then we're doing something wrong. And that this is because, everybody's just so divided. It's not because there's a battle going on for truth and that truth is hated by people who are opposed to God. So I think that this is something that we just can't get around. We happen to live in a moment of time where self-identity is more important than God-centered identity, that our truth is more important than the truth. And as we look at things like that, it becomes very clear why the story of a man who practiced unconditional love became associated with hatred and oppression for so many people. It's because our society values their desires more than the desires of God, and they don't want God telling them what to do. We are hateful as Christians because God has given us guidelines that we need to follow. So there's problems when I read kind of like what the point is, because I feel like in a society that is bent on the ultimate value of inclusivity, the ultimate value of we need to affirm people where we're at, that the difficulty here is we're pretending in this campaign that the reason that Christians are hated is because they think Jesus doesn't get them. When in reality, I think that the reason that Christians are hated is because Jesus does understand them and he wants to help them be made whole. But they choose their sin over Christ. So the problem is not one of lack of knowledge. The problem is one of lack of humility in our culture. So I don't know that they're going about it the wrong way. The commercials that I've seen, they're saying like, hey, like this guy, he was a rebel. He did these things. Society didn't like him and this and this and this. And, like Jesus understands, like he gets you. So like if you're living a life of crime and you're pushing against the boundaries and society's telling you that you're wrong, then like Jesus gets you, when in reality, like I don't think that we have a cultural voice right now that's telling people, hey, like there's a standard for sexuality. Hey, God has a plan for your life and it's centered around his truth, and that's sacrifice and thinking of others and doing these. I don't think that those are things that the culture are preaching. I think those are things that the culture tends to be preaching against. When I look at the elite that control mainstream media and social media and all of these kind of things, those seem to be the values that they're espousing. And it doesn't seem to me that he gets us is acknowledging that. So those are some problematic things that I see just kind of in that first paragraph. But they do have another page, which is the About Us. And, here in their About Us, they talk about he gets us as a movement to reintroduce people to Jesus of the Bible and his confounding love and forgiveness. We believe his words, example, and life have relevance in our lives today and offer hope for a better future. I agree with this statement. I think that Jesus does offer hope for a better future. I do believe that he's relevant for today. I totally agree with him on this. This all started with a diverse group of people passionate about the authentic Jesus of the Bible. While much has been said about him, much is still misunderstood. But we're confident that as people clearly understand, read, and learn for themselves about who Jesus is, they'll find wisdom, hope, and peace unlike any other offered. Again, agree with this. Be assured, though, that we're not left or right or a political organization of any kind. We're also not affiliated with any particular church or denomination. We simply want everyone to understand the authentic Jesus as he's depicted in the Bible, the Jesus of radical forgiveness, compassion, and love. So terms like the authentic Jesus are problematic because it's appealing to an espoused value without defining what that is. So like the authentic Jesus, how do we define what the authentic Jesus is? What is the methodology that we go to prove like this was the authentic Jesus? Because someone can say like, I want to represent the authentic Jesus. Well, what is that? There's a lot of kind of language in here that gives me pause and gives me concern. Like, is this something where, we're going forth and fighting for truth? Be assured that this is not left or right. I know everybody's like really tired of the political argument, but people are tired of the political argument that we have in our country right now, we have in the world right now, because they're ideologies that are battling against each other. And one of the things in much of the other things, I encourage you guys to go read this. I'm not going to read it all through the video, but just pieces of it here. One of the things that the He Gets Us campaign talks about is that when people get so clung to their ideology that it creates conflict with other people. So there's, again, a snuck premise here that conflict is a bad thing, that conflict is a sign of ungodliness. And it's just not true. We are going to come into conflict with the world. Organizations like this, I think that the heart is in the right place, that they want to let Jesus be known. But the problem is that I see the reason that we are where we're at is not because the church is doing everything wrong and it needs to be corrected and all of this. I think there's plenty the church can do better. There always is. But the reason we're at where we are is because ideologically the world is in rebellion against God. The elite who control the cultural conversation, the people who are feeding the algorithms and pushing these things out, they are basically telling us that we need to be true to who we are. We need to affirm who we are. We are the definition of our value. And when that is in complete odds with what God says, there's going to be conflict. And the truth is that Jesus gets us, all of us, like they said, but sometimes that means that he understands why you're in rebellion against him and why you're choosing to be in rebellion against him and hostile towards him and his truth, and you're choosing to go on a different path. And the appropriate action for that path is not acceptance and affirmation, it's judgment. Just as a believer who is seen in that way, who then says, Lord, you're right, I need to repent. That situation, it's not acceptance and affirmation, it's redemption. So he gets us, to me, is missing the key element of redemption. As I've looked through the stuff, you know, they talk a lot about Jesus. They talk about Jesus being the Son of God, came to earth, died, resurrected, then returned to heaven, and is alive today. They've included all of these voices. They esteem diversity and experience and inclusivity and all these kind of things. And to me, my hope is that they are men and women of God. And I'm sure there's people who've contributed to the campaign and see the right of what they're trying to do, but that they course correct a little bit, because Jesus without redemption is not Jesus. Like, the gospel is all about redemption, not affirmation. And redemption requires something to be redeemed from. And if we disregard what we need to be redeemed from, then we are affirming people in sin, and that's not the good news. We're not releasing anybody from bondage. We're not giving anybody anything. We're just making them feel better where they're at. We're lying to them. And the Bible has something to say to people who lie to people to avoid conflict. I'll let you guys look that one up. All right. Those are my thoughts on He Gets Us. Hey, if you guys disagree, if you feel like there's something that we should look into further on this, something we're happy to kind of talk about, and interact with you guys in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe to this. Help us get this out there. Defeat that Goliath. Of an algorithm. And tune in next time, because we have much more to say.